welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grace, and today we're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about kind of an emergent technology that probably many of you may have seen in your just normal everyday. We're going to talk about 3D cloud and really how it's affecting the retail market space. We're going to do that with Beck Besecker, and he's the co-founder and CEO of a company called 3D Cloud by Marxent. Previously, he spent 13 years building interactive marketing solutions for Fortune 500 retailers and brands, including Target, Tesco. In 1999, he founded Copient Technologies, which is now NCR AMS. It was acquired by NCR in 2003. And then he served as Executive Vice President of New Business at Catalina Marketing, and a lot of us know them in the retail space as well. So, Beck, thank you for taking the time and joining us here on the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity.
So how did you come to be the CEO of a 3D cloud company? And then we'll dive into what 3D cloud is. But
sure. When I say my brother is our CTO here, and he's kind of been my co-founder in multiple companies. But we've always been in the marketing technology / kind of like content management space. Like our first company was you ever scan a loyalty card and get offers at the checkout? It looks like it's tracking your purchase history, like a really long receipt from CVS. That was us. You're welcome. But that company was before it was cloud, like an ASP, cloud-based content management tool for targeted marketing for retail. And so we've always been in and around the space of like, how do I engage consumer groups using a cloud platform that reaches out to multiple customer touch points. And we got into 3D. My brother's background is math, computer science, and he's a big 3D gaming guy. And he was sort of regaling me with the idea that, like, while 3D is in gaming and entertainment, there's going to be many, many, many more use cases in other verticals. And so this is, sort of circa 2011, 12. And that was enough to kind of pique my interest and say, geez, is 3D going to be yet another thing that'll need a content management system, like CRM did at one point in retail. So that's how we started.
That's awesome. For the folks that don't really understand what the 3D aspect is to cloud, can you maybe just to share a little bit about what 3D brings to kind of cloud and internet?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's 5 years or 7 years or 10 years from now, but it's somewhat inevitable that everything that you see, whether it's we work in the home space, so chairs and couches today, or shampoo bottles and toys and cars, any product you see visually represented on the internet will be a 3D model. It will no longer be a photo of a real physical asset. And the reason is that the support costs with maintaining 3D assets on a product page are just so much lower than maintaining photography. If logos change, if colors change, if components change, it's just operating in a 3D world is just much more sort of efficient and easily maintainable. It really got its start in the home space because like a client of ours, like Lazy Boy, they have hundreds, if not thousands of different fabrics that they could put on a given couch. And if you had to actually create every single version of those, fabrics and to go take a photo of that product, it would be, cost prohibitive. And so particularly high configurable products are really, purpose made to turn into 3D. But as the cost of 3D gets less and less expensive and it gets easier to make and easier to update, eventually everything will be a 3D object. You won't know the difference as a consumer other than you'll be able to twirl it around and look at it. But it also creates this sort of, now that it's in 3D, you can do a lot more with it. I can turn it into augmented reality and I can hold the shoe or the product in my hand. And so 3D just not only makes it's going to be a better customer experience, it starts to open the door to these other sort of use cases of I can start to share these assets around. I can use them in AR. I could put them in a room. I could share them in the metaverse. And so, yeah, our future will definitely be, every product on every product page will be 3D at some point.
From a personal perspective, we just recently purchased a vehicle, and it was amazing to see, a vehicle and be able to twirl the vehicle around and look at it from every angle and pivot above it and below it. Well, not below it, but street level with it, and change the color, right? Like, to your point, they didn't have a picture of a different vehicle matching all the craziness that I wanted to configure on it. It was all a 3D model, but it was enough for me to go, wow.
I'm a big Jeep guy, and I spend insane amounts of time. Jeep has a really good configurator, and I just spend ridiculous amounts of time configuring it. There's a little hidden gem that is not necessarily immediately self-evident, but when you go to the car lot and the associate says, "Hey, why don't you take a seat in this nice leather, seat?" Like, you're in the process of sort of selling yourself, right? And the exact same thing happens with 3D. I mean, if you view a product in 3D, you're 3 times more likely to buy it, like instantly.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's like control. It's like the ability to, and if you start to change it, you're like, oh, let me look at it in this color, that color. Like, you're just selling yourself on your own idea. And so there's a lot of like behavioral psychology around, immersing yourself in these products. Like, we work with, like Macy's is a big client of ours, and they have, for them, we do like augmented reality and product configurators and so forth, but they also have a room planner tool that's like on an iPad. And so if you came into the store, and as a store associate, I'm helping you lay out your space, they're trained to like turn the iPad to you and say, why don't you pick a floor color, or why don't you pick a wall color, or why don't you drag and drop this object in? As soon as you get involved, it no longer feels like you're being sold, like you're part of the process. And so that's the other cool thing about this space, is it's much more immersive and, emotional and sort of engaging than what you can do with photos.
And I love the aspect, right? I share with all my guests, right? I cyber-stalk my guests on their websites while they're guesting, because I can participate. So some of the coolness, if you want to follow along at home, it's at marxentlabs.com, MARXENT labs.com. What I love is, like, you can pick a product and actually see it in your own room, right? So if you're like, oh, how does this chair look in my office? Like, you used to have to like, enter the dimensions of the room, and it would create this stick figure drawing of a room, right? It was when it was really basic. I'm sharing how old I am here. But now you can just take a picture and then actually take the product and like drag it around and turn it. It's amazing. And to me, I love what you just said about how engaging that is, because then I'm like, oh, I see this chair in my room. Of course I want this chair, not some flat 2-dimensional chair.
And you're more likely to share it. Right. The next thing you'll do is you're like, oh, I just, viewed this product in my room. I wonder what my friends think. Or you send it to your spouse and you get their opinion. It just lends itself to, like, I'll tell you where that technology, which is called augmented reality, is, it really got its start in November of 2011. We actually wrote the very first AR app for the App Store way back when. And we have done everything. We've done shoes and handbags and jewelry and shirts, and the one that really like worked was furniture and home goods. In part because people were using it as like a proxy for like measuring. It's like what's a really big one is rugs, and it's really hard to get the right size rug, right? Even if you know like measurements. And so we did Batman, and we did cartoon things, and we did everything you could possibly imagine in AR. But we really found most people use it as a measurement tool. However, I know where Google and Apple are heading, there's no question, is that now I can use my phone to scan a real life object and create a 3D model of it instantly. And so the way we send photos back and forth today, we'll send 3D objects back and forth. It's like, oh, I'm at, this statue. Let me scan that and I'll send it to you. And you can experience the proxy of the real thing. And so it's going to be crazy. Like 5 or 6 years from now, we'll be, zipping things back and forth in AR like the Star Trek transporter. It's going to be pretty cool.
I love when you mentioned experiences, right? For those of you that still haven't gotten, a VR headset and haven't been, out there, whether it's the Portal by Facebook or whatever, the Quest or any of the ones that are out there, the cost has come down. My son, I remember when we bought it years ago, we spent $800 or $1,000 for one of these VR headsets way back when. Now they're consumable at $300. And you can go places that you may never go to, right? You can go visit. The other day, just 2 weeks ago, I was on top of the Swiss Alps, right? And I was looking down and I was experiencing it. And short of the smell aspect, right, which I also think is developing, my body was registering that I was on top of the Swiss Alps, which I will never experience in my lifetime, given my physical condition.
So it's interesting. And we did, Macy's was the first retailer in the galaxy to put VR inside a store. And we created an experience where you could go in and work with a designer and actually be immersed in the space while you're designing. It was a pretty neat experience. I think it's still doing well, but we have learned that, like you kind of mentioned it, like doing VR when you're in the privacy of your own home and you're like, visiting the Swiss Alps or going to Italy on vacation or whatever, like people will spend a really extended amount of time in the headsets. Mm-hmm. But in an unfamiliar environment like retail, you get about 2 minutes. People get very self-conscious about, like, hey, I'm with a bunch of strangers and I'm blind and I don't know what's around me. And so VR is kind of more like you might, like with our customers, you do the design and maybe you do it on a screen. But then at the end, you put the headset on for a couple of minutes and walk around the room. So in retail, I'm not sure it's going to be like something in retail where people do a lot of, other than kind of like part of an experience. So that was a bit of a learning that we had to do there.
Yeah, I talk a lot on the podcast, right, when we're talking about futuristic technologies, whether it be the metaverse or such. I always reference people to like Ready Player One, Ready Player Two book. The Ready Player Two is only in a book. Ready Player One's literally a universe where people exist mostly in the metaverse on headsets, and they do shopping there, right? There's all kinds of scenes where they're grabbing virtual, whether the items are virtual or the items are physical, like they're buying their own haptic suit, right? And having that Amazon experience in that virtual world allows you to experience that product, totally virtually, and then have it delivered physically to your house. I can totally see almost from that shopping from home aspect, I can see that, Amazon will soon be out there with VR product and VR Amazon and such.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we get a lot of questions from our clients as well, like what should we be doing around the metaverse or NFTs and, all the stuff that's emerging. And it's funny, I was laughing that, like, we were skinning our knees in the early days of AR and VR, and then it became MR, then XR and something else. And it's like, we finally got kind of past all that hype cycle, and these things were starting to be used for like real life things. And then all of a sudden Metaverse just kind of created a whole nother hype cycle. But it's funny, like what's happening right now is that people they're kind of like using the Metaverse to rebuild things that already exist. It's like step one. It's like the first thing you do. It's like, oh, let's build a virtual mall to walk around. It's like, it's kind of where you start, but then people are starting to get really clever on kind of what's next. But like, I don't want to go to a virtual car lot any more than I want to walk a real car lot. Why would I want to go to a virtual mall, right, and walk around? I think the reality is it's going to be more like a bunch of creators creating their own spaces, a la Minecraft, and then populating it with things you can buy from, brands and retailers. But I don't think the future of the metaverse is like walking around a Nike store. I think it's probably going to be more about a lot of individual creators using content and, needing a way to get compensated. So, but anyway, it remains to be seen. We're pretty early yet.
Right. We in the pandemic, from a consulting perspective, we used to attend trade shows and conferences, and a lot of that was like, oh crap, how do we do this virtually, right? How do we bring all these people together? Because we can't just have a Zoom meeting. We're talking thousands and thousands of people. And there was a lot of companies that created essentially virtual conferences, virtual expo floors, where you would literally get an avatar and you would move between rooms and you'd hear speakers in that room, or you could move to the expo hall and see all the vendors, and you click on the vendor and you'd be talking to the vendor just like you would. It was kind of interesting. I think it was a flash. People were like, "This is great," and then people were like, "This is really clunky. This kind of doesn't work."
It's like it's hard enough to find the speaker, the room you're trying to go to in real life at a conference, let alone trying to find it. I missed a bunch of presentations and virtual events because I couldn't figure out like how to get to the right room. And now you're right. Now there's the new ones are different. I mean, the new ones are much more like the speaker comes to you kind of experiences, and they're much more, much more seamless than like trying to navigate a virtual hall.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to like replicate the serendipity of like bumping into somebody on a trade show floor.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think anybody wanted that.
Your avatar could talk to my avatar while we ate a virtual hot dog or something.
Yeah, my avatar could look at your name tag to see if you were a vendor or a potential client.
Right.
Very uncomfortable part of trade shows, right?
It was interesting because I was talking to BMW. We purchased one, and they said BMW is really reconsidering their presence, right? Instead of having a lot full of cars at great expense to BMW, they might have one or two cars in a showroom, much like a Tesla dealership, if you've ever seen it, or a Tesla store. They don't have all the cars you can buy. They have a few sample vehicles, and then you custom order your car, and it's delivered to you, in our case, 3 months later. But that experience, that's the power to me of the VR technology that you guys are pioneering. Is it replaces the need to sit and smell the leather, right? My value isn't sitting and smelling the leather. The value is being able to pivot around inside this and go, oh, I love this, the cockpit design. I love how the car looks and feels. Well, not feels, but how it looks and appears, and I can see myself in this image.
Yep, no question about it. I think that, and some of the things you mentioned, like touch and smell, and some of the things that are hard to replicate, those are being replaced. Like, if I think consumer reviews as an example, like if I'm never going to actually touch or feel the couch before I get it, if I can combine, sort of a 3D experience and an AR experience, plus I have a consumer review that told me when they got it, they loved the smell and it was so comfortable. Like, you kind of stitch together some of this, no pun intended, kind of stitch together the things you can't get from a, in-person experience.
Totally agree. We talked a little bit about, kind of the future and how this is still emerging, right? I think when I look at the work that you guys have done, it makes me believe, like, of course this is everywhere, right? These guys have been out there for 20 years doing this. And that's really not the case. We're kind of still emerging as far as market penetration, at least. Where do you see it going, over the next 5 years?
Well, so one of the reasons and believe me, I mean, we've got 5 years of sort of trial and error to figure out kind of where this stuff is going to stick. But so creating 3D models is not inexpensive. And it's still, there's no like I did see some cool stuff actually come out recently from Unity or Epic, one of those guys that you can just describe what you want and it'll create a 3D model for you. Of course, that's not going to be a perfect representation of a product, but the someday you'll be able to take a photo of something, or it'll be really inexpensive to create 3D assets. And when that's the case, using 3D for shoes to handbags to jewelry to whatever, I mean, it will just become, why wouldn't you? But we're at a time where creating 3D models of like a $10,000 product catalog is still pretty expensive. And so there's the initial cost, and then there's like, how long is this product going to stay in inventory? So with something like a kitchen cabinet or bathroom vanity, things that we do, once we create the catalog, you only get about 20 to 30% turnover a year. And so now I can amortize the cost of that 3D modeling across all these, hundreds of thousands or millions of consumer experiences and get a return on investment. But if I 3D model a shoe today and it's out of stock in 3 months or falls out of, people don't like it, right? Favor, then, I'm going to waste that. And so it's like the cost of modeling is still going to limit where this goes for a little bit. And products that have a long shelf life in 3D are the places where it's going to go first. And then categories like consumables, or maybe even you could see Uber Eats. why aren't they doing 3D pictures of the food that you could potentially buy? And so it'll eventually get there, but the cost of modeling needs to really come down for this to just kind of go crazy.
Love it.
Probably a few years away.
Okay. You mentioned some of the clients, right, that are starting to do this or adopting it. I'm a big strategy guy, right? And I always tell people, understand the technology and then create a strategy around how to best deploy it and use it. Maybe talk about, do these projects, do these companies come to you and go, hey, we want to create a 3D of this, or do they come to you and go, help us create a strategy on how we bring 3D into our portfolio?
It's I'd say up until probably 2018-19, it started to switch, but definitely before that, it was very much like, hey, I saw somebody do an AR project, I want to do an AR project too, or I want to do some kind of product configurator. It was very application centric. And then after they had done a few projects or felt the pain of doing a project, and they're like, man, it's a pain to manage this content, and how do I update the variants, and how do I manage for compression and different file formats and all the stuff you have to do to think about it. It's not just as soon as you want to use the same thing in 2 areas, you now need a content management system. And so that really started to change in 18, 19. And then these big enterprise retailers, like a Kingfisher or Woodmark or Macy's, they were like, okay, I need a content management system, or I'm going to have these 3D assets all over the place. And how am I managing for file types and versions and browsers and devices? And so that really changed. And we had sort of imagined that would happen. It probably took 3 years longer than we would have liked it to, but it did eventually happen. And now most of our prospects are calling and saying hey, I need a content management system. Very similar to how they might say, I need a CRM system today. Very similar.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Is there enough deployment to kind of say, hey, when you deploy 3D, the result is 5x, 3x, right? If you don't, if you 2D. Do we have enough market data yet to say if you deploy 3D, this is kind of the indicative results you can expect?
Yeah, so we've done close to 3 billion, if not more than 3 billion in 3D enabled sales in the last few years.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of volume that's happening in 3D now. We have, in Macy's, they have all 15,000 of their furniture products all in 3D and AR. So, there are clients that are getting pretty well scaled, but if you view, now like we were talking before, I don't know if this applies to shoes and handbags or cars yet. So each of these categories is going to kind of have their own, sort of data and performance. But if you view a couch in AR, you're 3 to 4 times as likely to purchase it. And so we know that for a fact. And we know if you view one product in AR, you're more likely to view 4. So once you know how to do it, you'll just start expecting to kind of see it. For like these room visualize or room planners where you're laying out an entire space. And so the way to think about this is it used to be if you wanted to design a whole room, whether it's a kitchen or bath or deck or what have you, you had to meet with a professional. They had to go through their catalog. They had like a tool that they would use on their desktop. There really wasn't a tool you could use yourself. But now, the way 3D is advanced on browsers, we can deploy these planning tools to consumers. It's actually not very different than like when we could all start buying airline tickets on Expedia. Like all of a sudden, it was a desktop tool for a pro, and then somebody put it online, and we could all do it ourselves. And so that's kind of it's a similar kind of situation. But if you have a planner tool, like average order value will increase by 60 to 100%. Returns will go down by like 25%. Pretty powerful. And they're all, I think about it like it's e-commerce, but before you check out with that product, you put them all in the same room and then check out. Mm-hmm. And so you're buying a room, right? Rather than like one object at a time.
Nice. Do you see a shift in maybe emerging retailers? Macy's is long established with a physical footprint, so is Lowe's and such. If you were coming to market with a new product, right, you could open stores or you could go strictly online leveraging VR, 3D. It seems like that would really cause somebody pause, right? To be like, ooh, do I go virtual and leverage all this technology, which is probably the future, or do I go open, across the U.S., all these physical stores with just a lot of overhead?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the guys that were the established big major brands and the digital native brands, at least in the home space, are all converging to the same point. And that is, you sort of alluded to it earlier. I want a, killer e-com experience with a lot of immersion and sharing and content and visuals and a lot more in the way of like curation and recommendation. And then all these 3D tools where consumers can engage. And then on the physical side, they're all going to the same city, right? It's wherever there's a Super Bowl, right, or a football team. And it's like the stadium cities, and they're putting up a showroom, right? And so it's this combination of showrooming and e-com and, hopefully quick shipping that everybody's is sort of moving towards. And the guys that have a lot of store locations, if they can, their challenge is these native digital companies, right? They're like, they're hiring for e-com and social, and it's a different like talent profile than like maybe somebody's been in furniture stores for 50 years. And so the race is how quickly the digital guys can understand showrooms versus how quickly the established guys can understand digital and consumer engagement. And so they're both trying to build the opposite teams. And but the guys that are in physical retail, they can build their digital teams quick, will be the most advantaged if they can go get them. And then you see situations like where Lazy Boy bought Joybird, which was a native digital company. And so they kind of said, hey, let's get there faster and let's go get that talent. And so, the race is on for sure.
And how about a company that kind of sits in the middle, right, that's trying to serve both these folks? How about your growth as a company and kind of how are you guys doing? You mentioned earlier the $3 billion kind of in enabled sales. It sounds like you guys are on a great growth path, just yourselves.
Yeah, we're a B2B SaaS company, so we're not like we're not like a Instagram, right, where you're growing
Right.
bazillion users but yeah, I mean, we're, doubling every, the last couple of years, and the, we've more than doubled our team in the last 12 months. Um, it was interesting during COVID. It was a little scary because you didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
But then it was funny, it was funny. Every advisor that I turned to during COVID said, get skinny, you don't know how long this is going to last, conserve cash. And then that was true for like 2 months. And then boom, the home industry took off. And I was like scrambling to get, grow as quickly as we could. So it's funny how it's hard to trust your instincts sometimes when you have so many people I've been thinking about it with this market turned down, like what's the right thing to do? And, but anyway, we've been growing pretty good. We've got a big client base and continue to add. And, we're, I think it's new enough that we're going to be expecting, 50% or better growth over the next few years as well.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny to hear you kind of share your experience with the pandemic, because we kind of did the same thing, right? From a consulting perspective, tech consulting, we're like, oh shit. And we just kind of paused, and we paused for like 2 minutes, 2 months. And we kind of said, nobody do anything. Let's figure this out. We think the market's going to stagnate. And then once everyone realized like technology was needed to help solve the problems of the pandemic, then our business just went vertical, and we were like, oh crap, now let's play some catch up. And, now it's great. And the value of technology, it really kind of helped enable the world to.
It's funny to me, like nobody when a market turns the wrong direction, it's like watching, I don't know, like when you watch Sports Center and, a team is favored by a heavy amount, you never hear like the one guy on the panel say, no, so-and-so is going to come, the underdog's going to win. Nobody picks them, right? So you have to be, I've been through 6 downturns between, .com, 9/11, the housing market, COVID. I don't know what we're calling this one yet, but like every time there's somebody emerges on the other side strong, and you just got to figure out what that strategy is. But retrench and don't spend, and like that's not a way to, you're just sort of trying not to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not healthy for the team, and go sell something else, right? That plays into the market, right? Figure it out.
Well, and from a leadership perspective, right, the whole team's kind of looking to the CEO, right? They're looking to you to be like, what do we do? Where do we go, right? And the reality is CEOs are people too, right? You're trying to figure it out, just like everyone else, right? I think sometimes that C level is just people look and they're like, well, of course they know, and it's like, well, they know about as much as you know, right? And they're just trying to make the best decisions they can, given as much information as they have. So,
yeah, it's funny that you've got to, it's a lonely spot to be in. I know a lot of other CEOs, and we all talk about the same thing. Like, there's nobody to look to, there's nobody to complain to. There's only so much your spouse is willing to listen to. Of course, he or she is ready to turn you off. So it's like you kind of just have to, take a leap of faith and make the best decision you can, and just it's my brother and I always talk about friction. Just keep friction, like keep rubbing 2 things together, and eventually you'll find a way through it. But yeah, it's like don't spend any money and hide, and conserve is just a recipe for disaster, future disaster, even if not now.
Right. I love it. We talked a little bit about the metaverse. That's always a fascinating thing. Have you guys done work within the emerging metaverse, and what would you say your predictions are for 3D within the metaverse?
So, it depends on how it's defined. I mean, we do, web-based applications that are immersive 3D today and VR. So I guess, by some definition, we're in it. I think the metaverse, the way I think about the metaverse is a series of open source tools that anybody can use to create an environment that other people can experience. Kind of like what if OpenCraft or Minecraft were like open source, or Roblox were like open source, and so that's how I think of like what it is, more like a Ready Player One type. We could all build our own thing, and so I think that what my prediction for the metaverse is that the most important variable will be whatever the equivalent of the hyperlink is. In other words, like whatever allows you to portal from place A to place B, right? Whenever your interest or inclination, creates that move,
Mm-hmm.
that plug in between two different, open spaces that'll be the actual like thing that creates value in the metaverse. It's like link share way back in the day, right? Or whatever. It's like tools for people to build, and then whatever that connection point ends up being, and how it gets opened. It's like then it'll become a popularity contest. Like, oh, I want to connect to that too, and I want to connect to that too. But that's what I imagine it will really be. And so somebody will come up with like, hopefully it's something that it's not one big company like dominates, but that the ability to connect between two experiences, I think, where the real value is going to be.
I love it. Um, 4D to me, I've got my eye keenly on kind of 4D, right? Where we can add smell or touch or some other dimension, right? And there's a lot of computer chips that are starting to process kind of smells and things. I think it's coming rapidly. I saw the first haptic suit is kind of getting out there. Of course, it's not consumer grade. It's so many bazillions of dollars, but you could then sit on a couch in 3D and be like, ooh, my butt likes the way that this couch feels, right? I mean, I feel it coming soon. It just is exciting, right? You guys are in 3D, and that itself is exciting. Whether it's the metaverse or 4D as the next dimension, it just seems like such a cool way to experience products.
Yeah, I'm kind of in there's only so many different. I got to ride the .com wave, I got to ride the mobile wave, and I got to ride the 3D wave. Yeah, I'll be 52 this year, so there's only like I don't.
Come on.
I think I want to leave the smell in the metaverse to the next generation. Maybe somebody on my team will go figure that out and start their own company. That would be cool. But I think it's we've tended to be as a company pretty like pragmatic, like doing kitchens and baths. It doesn't take a genius to go, okay, people are going to want to do that in 3D.
Right.
But some of these sort of next generation things, it's like I think it's hard, after a certain point in your career to really sort of you lose your imagination a little bit. But I've got 17-year-old twin boys, and they're in their heads all day long, and the fact that their dad works for a 3D company has been the VR company. They get all their equipment right that they need, and it's pretty interesting. We did a physics game the other night. It was a really simple Spider-Man game. It's like a knockoff, right? But it was like this web slinging experience where you could like your momentum and your angle of drop and gravity, and like you had to understand where it was the right time to, and it was just amazing. Like I spent like 2 hours in there. I was all sweaty, and boys were laughing at me, and I wasn't very good at it at first, but once you get the hang of it, but man, it's I mean, if you start to tie that with how your body feels and the wind blowing and the fear of falling, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
I'm jealous I won't be there to see all that, but yeah.
If you ever went to any of the Disney parks and you did soaring over California, right, where you're soaring over the orange orchards, and all of a sudden you're like, is that orange trees? Like, is that citrus I'm smelling? And it's just crazy how it just adds that frosting to the already cool cake of you being immersed, in this flying around California. It's very cool. There's definitely coolness to what you guys already do. There's coolness coming. Beck, thank you for taking the time and sharing all the stuff you guys are doing in the field. You kind of make furniture shopping exciting, or at least far more interesting than otherwise it would have been. It's just very cool to have you here to share the latest on the cutting edge of tech.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it, and thank you for the time.